Hello and welcome to your first ecology lecture for biology honors. Today we're going to be starting with just some ecology basics. We're going to talk about some different biomes and then we're going to get into trophic levels. So biomes and ecosystems that are land-based are known as terrestrial biomes, and they're broken down into regions, and those are those kind of big biomes that we're going to talk about. And they're based on three distinct traits: precipitation, elevation, and substrate. Precipitation means how much water is entering the biome, so if it's getting a large amount of rainfall or snowfall. Elevation is where the region occurs in the world and basically how high up it is. So if something is at sea level, that's kind of the lowest elevation you can get, and then it goes up from there. And then a substrate is what makes up the biome. So is it rocky? Is the soil a really high quality? Is it sandy? So I want you to pause for 1 minute. And I want you to try to remember those three things we just talked about off the top of your head. Then describe them. If you can't, go back and rewatch. So next, we're going to start to talk about different biomes. This is going to include the rainforest, the desert, the tundra, the deciduous and coniferous forest, and grasslands. If you haven't already opened up or printed out your biome chart, please do so. It's under the supplemental materials for this lesson so that we can fill it out together. So this is the chart we're going to fill out, and this is what you should have. So let's go ahead and take a look. So if we look at the rainforest is going to have consistently warm temperatures. And really, the temperature doesn't really vary from season to season. They're going to have tons and tons of rainfall, and the soil is going to be very rich. And all three of these things right here help basically create that huge diversity of life that the tropical rainforest has. Then we have the desert, and we're all very familiar with this biome. The temperature can get down to be very cold in the winter at night and very, very high in the summer during the day. We're all very aware of the 110s living in the desert. Obviously, we have low precipitation and low water, and the soil quality tends to be a little bit more poor. The tundra, these are like the Arctic kind of areas. Temperature is going to be below freezing pretty much the whole year. You're not going to have a lot of rainfall or really even snowfall. It's just ice, and the soil is going to be poor. Deciduous forests and the coniferous forests kind of are similar. Deciduous is going to have a nice, solid, steady temperature year-round. That's very nice. It's going to have lots of precipitation and very, very rich soil. The coniferous forest is we're going to see kind of those lower temperatures. We're still going to get lots of water, and the soil is going to be very rich. And then last but not least is the grasslands. And the grasslands can be very high temperature and low water during their drought season that they have every year. But then the temperatures can kind of cool down and they can get lots and lots of water during the monsoon season. So just to review again after looking at that chart, elevation, which is going to help determine temperature, precipitation, which is the water, and substrate, how rich your soil is really going to help determine what biome you're looking at. Next, we're going to look into aquatic biomes. So these are biomes that are going to occur in the water, and they're very different from terrestrial biomes. Basically, the big kind of difference here with aquatic biomes is you're going to either have a salt or a freshwater biome. If it's a salt water, we're going to refer to it as a marine biome, and if it's a freshwater biome, we're simply just going to call it a freshwater biome. There also is kind of an in-between a fresh and saltwater aquatic biome. These are called estuaries. This is where rivers connect with the ocean. So this is why we say freshwater meets saltwater. Now, obviously, Arizona isn't a coastal state. We aren't connected to the ocean directly, but we do have many rivers that flow through us that eventually do empty out into the ocean. For example, the Colorado River. So we're going to talk about different zones, and these zones are based on two main traits: how deep they are, which is going to affect how cold it is, how much pressure and how much light can penetrate, and contact with the land. And when you look at depth, something really important is the lower you go, the less light you're going to have. The lower you go, the more pressure you're going to have, and the lower you go, the temperature is going to decrease. And this one's really easy to see because when you go swimming in your pool, the top may be really, really hot, but as you dive down deeper to the bottom of your pool, it gets very cold. So let's talk about some of the different zones in marine biomes. First, we have the neritic. This is going to be our intertidal zone. So this is really right on the top where water and land meet. There's plenty of light, and a lot of times we see a lot of diversity of life. Oceanic is open sea, very photic, but no contact with land. The pelagic is going to be open sea. It's non-photic and has no contact with the land. And then the benthic is the deep sea. So we're basically going to have no light, and it's going to be very cold temperatures and high pressure. We are going to have contact with the land though, because we're reaching the bottom. So here's a picture that kind of shows you all those different zones. Here was our intertidal and neritic zone, and you can see this is where just that really photic area is going to meet the land. So anytime it says photic zone in this area, you are going to have a lot of light penetrating. So the pelagic is going to be very open ocean as well as the oceanic zone. Then we have an aphotic zone. This means that there's not a lot of light penetrating. Here's the benthic zone, or the kind of deep sea. You can see it's always connected with the bottom. And then this is kind of an interesting one here, the abyssal zone. What this means is these are going to be depths that are 7,000 meters or lower. So that is really where we're going to see that high pressure and low temperatures. So let's review for a second. Which of the marine subdivisions do you think is going to have the most life, and why? Let's go ahead and pause, review. All right, so if we look, we're going to have the photic zones, or those kind of intertidal zones. Those are going to have your most life. Anything that has light penetrating it is going to have the most life, because light can help drive things like photosynthesis, which ultimately is going to give rise to a bunch of diversity. All right, next we're going to get on to energy levels and trophic levels. So when we say a trophic level, we're talking about really the energy level within this ecosystem. And basically, all of these relationships between living and non-living things are going to be dependent on how much energy is available. So we're going to look at some biotic organisms, and we're going to look at their energy needs. So when we look at trophic levels, there's going to be different levels. And a lot of times we do these trophic levels in pyramids, and your primary producers are going to be on the bottom. These are going to be your plants and autotrophs, so they can make their own food. They're going to go through photosynthesis. Primary consumers are going to be your herbivores. They're going to eat the primary producers. Secondary consumers are going to eat your primary consumers, and then tertiary consumers are going to eat your secondary consumers. So maybe this was some sort of plant. The plant got eaten by a grasshopper. That'd be our primary consumer. The grasshopper got eaten by a bird, let's say a little sparrow. That's your secondary consumer. And then the sparrow got eaten by a hawk. That would be your tertiary consumer. So when we look at these are food chains and food webs, and these are really going to help look at the different energy levels. So when we look here, this is a basic food chain. The sun is here just because it's what drives all of the autotrophs. So the leaves are going to be our primary producer. The slug is going to be your primary producer or consumer, eating the leaves. The frog that eats the slug is going to be the secondary consumer. And then the heron that eats the frog is going to be your tertiary consumer. And it says, notice the arrow direction. Your arrow is always going to be pointing towards the consumer. So if we look over here, this is what a food web is. And a lot of times we like to use food webs instead of food chains because they show a much higher complex relationship between different organisms. So if we look here, this phytoplankton is really going to be our primary producer, and you can see that it gets eaten by this plankton and this krill. So that's going to be the primary consumers of that phytoplankton. Then let's go up and let's go ahead and look at this crab eater seal. Okay, this seal is going to eat this krill, so he would be the secondary consumer to that krill. And then when we look at the small-toothed whales, you see that there's a lot of arrows pointing towards that whale. That's meaning that these whales are eating a lot more than just one thing. They're eating the crab-eater seals, they're eating leopard seals, they're eating elephant seals. They're consuming quite a lot of different organisms. So you can see how that food web is much more complex than the food chain. So what happens when we have dead, decaying flesh? We use detritivores and decomposers. So detritivores are going to be your scavengers. They are kind of a secondary consumer in a sense because they're eating some sort of dead or decaying flesh that was eaten by somebody else. And then decomposers are going to be usually bacteria, prokaryotes, and then also fungi that's able to break down dead or decaying flesh and recycle nutrients back into that ecosystem. So if we look here, these are some maggots. Okay, maggots, this is some sort of vulture. Here's a coyote. Those are all going to be our scavengers. So they kind of eat dead or decaying flesh that was killed by another organism. They're kind of our cleanup crew. Here is our fungi, and here's some prokaryotic bacteria. These guys are going to be your decomposers. So they're going to break down any kind of dead or decaying flesh, and in doing so, they're actually recycling a lot of the nutrients that we need to have the ecosystem stable. Energy flow. So when we look at energy flow, it's really important to know that not all of the energy that you're consuming from what you're eating is actually usable. Only 10% gets transferred from one trophic level to another. And a lot of times it's lost as heat when you're metabolizing it. So if you see here, every time we go up this food pyramid, and I like how there's zombies up here, every time we go up this trophic pyramid, we're only getting 10% of that energy from the organisms below it. And a lot of times we can show these in pyramids. And if you look down here, we have joules, which is a measurement of energy. And every time we go up a trophic level, we're only getting 10% passed on. The rest of it is lost as heat. The pyramid of biomass actually shows the weight of which each trophic level contains. So as you can see down here, there's tons and tons and tons of grass, and then as we move up those trophic levels, you can see the biomass is disappearing. Once again, this is a pyramid of numbers. This is showing the actual number of each type of organism on each trophic level. So what you look and see here is there's 1,000 bleak, and then as we go up, there's only 10% of those predators, which is a perch. So thanks for watching your Ecology Basics video. Now you have the opportunity to go and complete all of your assignments, and make sure that if you have any questions to feel free and message your instructor.